Hey, good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Good morning from Canada, of course. I hope the internet is working properly. If it is, good morning to everyone. Welcome to this live English lesson. Happy Friday to all of you. I believe that for most of you, the weekend has probably just begun, which is fantastic and part of the reason that I enjoy doing these live lessons at this time on the weekend. Everyone's in a good mood. Everyone's happy. We're happy that it's Friday, and we're looking forward to the weekend. Looks like RJ is here. Hello, RJ. Hello, Taylor. Hello, Kien. And hello to the rest of you watching. So, today is going to be a little bit of a strange lesson. I'm going to try to do my best to kind of teach you as best as I can in a short period of time. I have to actually move to a new town very soon, right after this lesson. So everything is packed up all around me. It's a little bit crazy right now. And this is kind of an advanced paragraph that we're going to look at. So what we're going to do in this lesson is look at a single paragraph from a blog post that is called 5 Ways to Handle Uncertainty. Now, let's talk about uncertainty for a second. We were just talking about it on Facebook, but uncertainty is all around us in life, obviously, right? I think it's also relevant to you as English speakers. I was having a meeting with one of my students this past week, and I was asking her what is it about speaking English that makes her feel not so confident? And she said that I just don't know if I'm right or not a lot of the time. I'm uncertain. I can't feel that sense of certainty that I can feel in my native tongue when I'm speaking. And I thought that, it seems like an obvious point, but the way that she said it really hit me and it stuck with me. So I think it's relevant to you, especially as English learners. Trying to communicate in a language that is not your first language involves a lot of uncertainty. So we're going to spend some time talking about how to deal with uncertainty. Now, this is uncertainty in a general sense, but like I said, I think it's relevant to all of you too. Okay, hello Satawat again. Hello Serjan Stefanovic from Montenegro, and Kani from Kurdistan, and Patricia is back from France. Hello Patricia. Christine is with us. Taylor from Korea. Annyeonghaseyo. Okay, let's get started, everyone. Like I said, I'm going to try and be efficient and quick with this. I do have some questions that I'd like you to ask, and we're going to learn some new interesting vocabulary too. So here we go. Now, this is an advanced article, okay? This paragraph is quite advanced. When I show you it, I'm going to read it one time. Don't worry if you don't understand everything. I will try to explain it as we go. So, this is from a Huffington Post article. The link to the full article is in the description of this video. But this is advice for handling uncertain situations. Okay, so remember that. Number 3, they say, I guess this is a list of 5 different ways to handle uncertainty. And number 3 is to reflect. This author suggests. Remember that you've faced uncertainty before. The psychological concept of hindsight bias, we'll talk about that in a second, says that we tend to create the illusion that everything in our past was certain, when in reality it was once uncertain. The fact that you stand here now is proof that you are strong enough to make it through. Take time to think and reflect on what helped you before. Write it down and then read it when your worrisome thoughts start to take hold. Okay? Don't worry if you don't understand. It's a complicated paragraph. Let's start with the first sentence. Remember that you've faced uncertainty before. To face something, like the verb is used here, means to confront it. Okay, so think about a problem that's literally right in front of your face. In this case, we're talking about uncertainty. You've faced uncertainty before means you've confronted uncertainty before. You've dealt with it before. Again, imagine something in front of your face that you have to deal with. Okay, so you'll often see in English the verb face used in combination with challenges, problems, obstacles, etc. We face challenges. We face many problems every day. We face obstacles in our lives all the time. In the comments section, I want you to tell me, what is one challenge that you are facing at work right now? What is one challenge you are facing at work? Remember, face. To face means to confront. Okay? Let me go back to YouTube here and check on the comments. Boris asks, can I understand British English at once? Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I think there's some sayings that I've probably never heard of before, but yeah, it's not difficult to understand British English for me. The Irish accent can be quite difficult. Good. Taylor says, I've faced uncertainty so many times. Good. Taylor, give me something specific at work. Okay? I want you to be specific. All of us, of course, face uncertainty all the time. Life is uncertain. Anton says, gossip. That's a really good one, Anton. Okay, so that's one challenge you're facing at work right now. And that is a difficult challenge to face, gossip. There's no good way to deal with that, I don't think. It's a tough one. I wish you all the best in dealing with that. So Anton is facing a challenge at work, and that challenge is gossip. And hello, Kong Tai Pham, I assume from Vietnam. Welcome, thanks for joining. Okay? So keep telling me in the comment section. I'm going to continue on with the next part of this paragraph. Now this is something that I'm excited to explain to you. The psychological concept of hindsight bias says that we tend to create the illusion that everything in our past was certain when in reality it was once uncertain. Okay, so what the hell is going on with this sentence? It's big, long, there are lots of new words, it's scary. Let's try to understand it. So first, the psychological concept. So this is the noun we're talking about here. The psychological concept. A concept is just an idea, basically. So the psychological concept of hindsight bias. This is the name. Hindsight bias is the name of the psychological concept. The psychological concept of hindsight bias, which we'll talk about in a second. But first, look at what this sentence does. It reports speech, so using the word says. The psychological concept of hindsight bias says. Now, normally, people speak. People say things. But we're actually talking about a concept that is saying something here. And sometimes we do this in English. Sometimes we use reported speech. Sometimes concepts can speak. Ideas can speak. So we're not actually talking about a person who's saying anything here. We're talking about an idea, a concept. So let's talk about hindsight bias. What is hindsight bias? We have two words here, hind and sight, in the first part of this phrase. Hind and sight. Hind means behind, okay, in the back, hind. And sight is sight, like vision. Hindsight bias. So what we're doing is we're looking back, hindsight. And bias is a good word to know. I'd recommend looking up bias in the translation for bias in your native tongue. But bias is basically when we have a preference to like one thing over another thing. Okay, so let's say for example that I have a child, and my child is taking dance lessons, and at the dance class, my child's dance class is putting on a performance. So I go to the performance, I watch my child dance with other children dancing, and I think to myself, my child is the best dancer among all of these children. Well, I have a bias, you could say. I have a bias to think that way because that child is my child. So of course, I'm naturally going to think that my child is better than the other children at dancing, for example. That's a bias. So hindsight bias. Now let's talk about what that is. Hindsight. So some event happens, okay? Then some time passes, and later, when you remember it, you feel like it was very predictable. Okay, so it's important to remember the time here. Let's think about time. Some event happens, and then some time passes, and we think back, we think into the past about that event, and we think the event was predictable. This will, of course, become clearer with some examples. So let's imagine a sports game, okay, for you sports fans. Sometimes we'll watch a sports game, and of course, we don't really know who's going to win, but afterwards, it seems obvious to us. The winner seems obvious to us. That's what hindsight bias is. We're looking back into the past, and the past seems so obvious to us now. Here's another example. In hindsight, it seems obvious that she fell in love with him. Okay, so we have a couple here, and they've been together for a long time, and we're looking back into the past. In hindsight, it seems obvious that she fell in love with him. It's now, right now, when I think about it, it seems obvious that they fell in love together. Okay? In hindsight, I shouldn't have gone to bed so late last night. So think about the time. Okay? Right now I'm in the present moment. I'm thinking about the past, and in the past I went to bed very late. Now that I'm in the present, now that some time has passed, I can look back and I think, oh, in hindsight, that was not a good idea. Okay, so we're looking back into the past and things seem predictable. And you often see the phrase used like this, in hindsight. In hindsight. When I look back into the past, that thing that happened seems obvious. So that was a lot of talking, and I hope that's clear. It's a complicated concept to understand. But in hindsight, what is something you should have done when you were younger? What is something you should have done when you were younger in hindsight? Okay, let's go back and talk about some challenges that people are facing at work. Arida says, I'm facing a big challenge at work, not having one. Right, okay. So I like the comedy there. Good for you. Your challenge is that you don't have a job. So that is a stressful situation. I wish you the best in finding one. Kong Talai says, I've faced uncertainty so many times about pronouncing some difficult words. Yeah, of course. Well, there's some things you can do to decrease your uncertainty in those situations. I would say one is Rachel's English is great for pronunciation. So that's a YouTube channel. You can look her up. And Satawat recommended something called Youglish to me, which is quite an awesome tool. Youglish, run by YouTube, I think. Look up Youglish on Google, and you'll find a great pronunciation tool. Taylor says, my boss wants me to create a new English book, but I don't even know where to start. Yeah, well, that's a big thing that you have to do. I wouldn't know really where to start either, but I don't know what kind of English book your boss wants you to create. Okay, I think that you guys are understanding what hindsight is, which is great, because I was concerned about it being too difficult to explain quickly in a live lesson like this. Let me just say, Patricia says, I'm facing difficult situations about being on time, I think you're saying. So being on time to work is difficult for you. Well, I don't know what your job is. I don't know what your life is like, but scheduling, perhaps there are some circumstances, though, that make things more difficult. Christine says, relationship is one of my difficulties at work. Sometimes I face extrovert social people. They want to talk all the time when I want to focus at work. Yeah, that's a good one, Christine. I like that. So dealing with other people in the workplace is a challenge. It's a challenge that you have to face. All of us have different personality types, and sometimes we don't mesh well together. Susan says, I'm facing difficulty to speak in front of many people, many times. Yeah. So public speaking is something that all of us, well, not all of us, I should say, but many of us have a fear of public speaking. I know I certainly do as well. It's easier now that I've done it for a while on these live lessons. It feels a little easier, but still in front of people in real life, I feel nervous. Although I haven't really had to do it much since starting these live lessons. So maybe doing this will help. Or maybe these live lessons will help with my fear of speaking in front of people. Okay, in hindsight, I should have studied more English. Yeah, well, you have lots of time, Benjamin. You can still do it. Boris, in hindsight, I should have not started smoking. Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm sure many smokers, in hindsight, regret having started smoking. That's a good one. And yes, Aradas, yes, retrospective. It's hindsight is looking back into the past and thinking that things seem obvious. Okay, so when I look back into the past, for example, when I went to Korea, I was extremely nervous at the time, but now in hindsight, it seems like it was an amazing thing to do. It was an amazing thing to do, but it seems like just such an obvious thing that I should have done. At the time, when it was happening, I was very nervous and anxious and uncertain about how it was going to be. In hindsight, though, everything was fine. Okay? Patricia, in hindsight, I should have studied more English. Lots of people are saying, in hindsight, I should have studied more than I did. Great, you guys are understanding hindsight bias. And this is something that native speakers use all the time. Hindsight, we use this phrase quite often, so it's really great to understand. Oh, Patricia, perfect. In hindsight, I should have studied English instead of Italian. Perfect sentence. And you still have plenty of time to study English. You're studying right now, so good for you. In hindsight, I should have studied more about pronunciation when I was young. Great. Well, and again, you guys all still have plenty of time to study, so keep up the great work. And the important thing is that you are understanding a very difficult concept in English, okay? So let's keep going with this. I've got to speed up the time here. We're going to go through this paragraph quickly. Let's go back to this sentence. The psychological concept of hindsight bias says that we tend to create the illusion that everything in our past was certain, when in reality, it was once uncertain. So what the rest of this sentence basically is a description of hindsight bias. Okay, so the rest of this sentence describes what hindsight bias is, and that is, we as people, we tend to create the illusion, so you can think about it like this, we tend to think in our minds that everything in our past was certain. Like I just said, when I went to Korea, right now it seems like it was so certain to me. It seems like it was an idea that was a great idea at the time. Okay? At the time, when in reality, at the time, everything was once uncertain. So in our minds, when we think about the past, everything seems obvious and certain. But at the time, when we were experiencing it, just like the present is right now, everything was uncertain. That's hindsight bias. Now let's look at this sentence, which I really like. I think it's great to remember. The fact that you stand here now is proof that you are strong enough to make it through. So what is this sentence saying? Remember, we're talking about uncertainty. Now the fact that you're here right now watching this lesson, the fact that you have done everything that you've done in your past and that you've survived, that is proof that you are strong enough to continue during these uncertain times. And I think this is something that we often forget in everyday life, right? So things happen to us, and then time passes, and we forget about those things. Sometimes those things are very difficult. We go through very hard times, and once those hard times are over, we quickly forget what we accomplished and what we did, what we struggled through. It seems like it was easy to us because of hindsight bias, right? So this is something important to remember, I think, in uncertain times. You've dealt with uncertain times before. You've dealt with uncertain times successfully before. And the proof of that is that you are here right now, watching me on this live lesson, studying English. You've dealt with a lot of crap in your life like everyone else, and you're here. So good job to you and to all of us. Now, let's finish this paragraph, and then I have one more question for you, and then unfortunately I have to get going. But take time to think and reflect on what helped you before. Write it down and then read it when your worrisome thoughts start to take hold. So we have an interesting phrase at the end there, start to take hold. If you take hold of something, you're basically just grabbing it. I'm taking hold of my coffee cup right now. So if worrisome thoughts start to take hold, it means if your worried thoughts start to take over, basically, they kind of corrupt your mind, then you can have this list of things to look at, things that helped you in the past. So it's a nice paragraph here, and I think it's great advice to remember in uncertain times. The key point being that you did them before. You did everything before. You survived before. It may seem horrible and uncertain in the moment, but you've dealt with it before successfully. And we have hindsight bias too, so the past seems easier than it was. All right? So let me leave you with this question, and then I will read the comments. What is something you did in the past that you were terrified of doing? Think back into the past. What is something you did that you were terrified of doing? I remember in my final semester of university, I had to take what was called a seminar. And a seminar, at least how the university defined it, was just a small class of 15 students that met once a week. And each student in that class had to give a long, I think 30 to 45 minute presentation about something from whatever piece of literature we were studying. So we had to do a long presentation and talk for a long time and say lots of smart things because there were smart people in the group. And I remember thinking the other people had better things to say than I did. I was concerned about speaking and making good points in front of other people. I was terrified of it for a long time. But I did it, and it was great. It went okay. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't horrible, though. And that was something that I did that terrified me. So let me know in the comment section, what is something you did in the past that terrified you at the time? Okay, let's go back to these comments here. Patricia said, in hindsight, I have to given smoking earlier. So I think you're saying in hindsight you should have given up smoking earlier. In hindsight, I should have given up smoking earlier. You often see with this phrase, in hindsight, I should have. Okay, so we're talking about things that we should have done. Not always, but often you'll see that phrase. In hindsight, Christine says, I should have eaten healthy food and make diet. You could say in hindsight, I should have eaten healthy food and stuck to a diet. We use that phrase a lot when we're talking about diets. Stick to a diet. Okay? It's an interesting phrase to use, I think. Taylor, I was in Korea for 2 years. Taylor asks, I feel like I'm facing uncertainty about my English as I'm typing out what I want to say or ask in this chat. Yeah, well, I started the lesson by saying this, is especially in a language that's not your own, you're always going to feel a little uncertain, I think. Not always, I should say, but it's easy to feel uncertain as you're learning because it's you don't have that feeling that you have in your native tongue. It's not the language you grew up with. Of course you're going to feel uncertain. But Taylor, you're doing well. I can understand everything that you've been typing, so no problems there. And of course, that's the main thing that you're trying to do. If you can communicate your ideas effectively, then that's all that matters, in my opinion. I mean, there are some times when you need to be precise, but in a conversation like this, I understand you perfectly fine. Good. So studying hard computer science, says Benjamin, helped to grow my ability. Yeah, and that's something that was probably difficult to do. Well, it probably still is difficult to do, but at first it was probably extremely difficult to do when you were just learning everything. Christine, in the past, you traveled to Lebanon and you were terrified. Riding airplanes, yeah. So many people have a fear of flight. I hate flying too, personally. It's not my favorite. I get nervous every time I'm on a plane as well. So I can empathize with you, Christine, and I'm happy to know that you were able to overcome your fear of flying and visit Lebanon. Good for you. That's awesome. So Tawat says, I had to give a lecture in English in front of a lot of native speakers. I was so nervous, but it was really good. That's awesome to hear, Satawat. That's probably like the best thing you can do to feel more confident as an English speaker is give a presentation in front of some native English speakers. Just gave me some ideas, actually. So thank you, and I'm glad it worked out. Benjamin, bad habit with my coworker terrified me. What bad habit? Be more specific, Benjamin. Let me know. Kong Twai Pham says, I was terrified of speaking English in front of people when I was a freshman in university. Yeah, that's a terrifying experience. Again, it sounds... Were you at a university in an English-speaking country? Kong Twai Pham? Let me know. But yeah, good for you. That's, of course, a terrifying experience, or it can be. So good for you. You got over it. Patricia says, 10 years ago I was terrified to make a jump elastic, but I did it. I'm a little confused by what you mean there, Patricia. Let me know again. And I've got about 3 more minutes and then I've got to take off. My mom is preparing to leave for work and I have to leave the house with her. So she says hi to all of you, by the way. Taylor says, I was terrified of teaching English to adults for the first time at the beginning of the year. I guess this is because I was so used to teaching kids for a long time. Yeah, I can relate to that, Taylor. It's quite different. Teaching adults is fun, though. You get to do stuff like this. You can ask questions and you can actually have conversations. I prefer it to teaching children as much as I love teaching children. Teaching children is a lot of fun too, but I prefer adults. It's more interesting. You can do more interesting things, I think. And Kong was in school in Vietnam. Good for you. It's I haven't visited Vietnam, but I hear it's quite a beautiful country. And good for you for getting over your fear of speaking in front of people. Good. And Taylor, I'm glad that it's working out. And Mom Taylor Huang from Korea says hi. Taylor Huang from Korea says hello to you.
Hello. Hello.
I don't know if you can hear her. She says hello. You wanna come say hello to everyone?
Got no makeup on.
She's got no makeup on, so she's worried.
Hi everyone.
There's the chat right there.
Okay.
It says hi, Jacob's mother.
Hello.
Okay.
Okay, have a good day.
Bye-bye. All right, everyone, and that's all the time that I have for today. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. We're right on time. 8:15 was where I wanted to end. So I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend, and I hope that this paragraph and some of the things that we talked about today will help when things feel overwhelming in uncertain times, which of course happens to all of us quite often, okay? Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. I'll be here again hopefully next Friday, and hopefully every Friday after that. Bye-bye.